Born in the Windy City, Brian Freeman began his writing journey earlier than most. In his 6th grade, he started a mystery about the murder of a chess grandmaster. And at 13, encouraged by his 8th grade composition teacher, he completed his first full-length novel. His career as a professional writer would have to wait a bit, as Freeman graduated from Minnesota's Carleton College and embarked on a career in marketing and public relations. Working by day and writing by night, Freeman completed his debut novel, Immoral, in 2005. The novel, featuring Lieutenant Jonathan Stride, won the McCavity Award for Best First Novel. It was the launching point for a career that to date has spanned more than 20 novels, including 3 series and 5 standalone novels, crossing genre barriers in the process. More awards and nominations followed, as he was nominated for an Edgar and a finalist for the Thriller Award. He would finally win the latter for his novel, Spilled Blood. Freeman's talent and versatility caught the eye of Putnam, who tapped him to reboot Robert Ludlum's Jason Bourne series. Appropriately named The Bourne Evolution, Freeman has reinvigorated the franchise with a new direction, while remaining true to the spirit of Ludlum's original vision. The novel represents not only a new start for Jason Bourne, but the next evolution of Brian Freeman on his race up the bestseller list.
I'm Brian Freeman, and you should be watching the Crew Reviews.
Boys, let's raise a glass. We got Brian Freeman in the house.
Hey.
Welcome to the show, Brian.
Welcome. Oh, he's
Thank
right
you.
in with us.
Glad to be here.
Beautiful.
So, Brian, you have some big shoes to fill when you accepted the challenge of rebooting Robert Ludlum's Jason Bourne series. And it just so happens the title of the book you just wrote, The Bourne Evolution, kind of fits with the whole theme of rebooting and evolving. So why don't you give our listeners a snapshot of Jason Bourne in 2020 and tell us how Bourne has evolved?
Yeah, well, you know, when Putnam first approached me about doing a reboot of Bourne, it was it was great, but it was pretty damn intimidating as well. I've been a huge Bourne fan my whole life. I first read the Bourne Identity. Gosh, I guess I was 17 years old when I read it in 1980. So, you know, it's kind of like having life come full circle to have a chance to reboot Bourne. But then I started kind of going back over all the iterations of Bourne that have happened in 40 years. I mean, you've got the 3 Ludlum books, you've got 11 books by Eric von Luthbader, you've got the Matt Damon movies, and not a lot of people remember this, but you've actually got the Richard Chamberlain, Jacqueline Smith miniseries from 1988.
Right. Damn right.
Yeah,
So,
I did not know
you've got
about that.
all of these different visions in people's head of Jason Bourne, and how do you kind of stay true to all of that? And so my idea was, clearly it's been 40 years. So much of Bourne's original backstory in the Bourne Identity was traced to his experiences in Vietnam. That wasn't going to work in 2020. So my thought really was to go back to the roots of who this character is and why Bourne has become such an iconic thriller hero over the years, and try to capture that essence of him as a character and his fractured mental state, and then bring that into the present and try to find a plot line that was in the same kind of spirit of what Ludlum was trying to do with his character. Honestly, I kind of felt like this time in the world wasn't really all that dissimilar to the era in which Ludlum was writing, because so much of his storylines were inspired by the distrust in government and conspiracies that were coming out of Vietnam and Watergate. And, we've got a fair amount of that kind of stuff going on.
A little bit.
I've heard
so, it felt a little bit like deja vu, that it wasn't really that difficult to bring Bourne back into that kind of situation here in 2020.
Very interesting.
You just alluded to the fact of the heavy burden of taking on a huge series, and obviously we all know that Ludlum is just legendary. So kind of take us through the thoughts. I'm sure there was a lot of excitement, and I'm sure there was a lot of stress, the idea of carrying on this tradition. And so maybe you can tell us a little bit about that process you went through taking on this new role.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I guess there was a lot of stress, particularly in the early days, kind of thinking about that. I mean, because not only is Bourne so iconic, but I mean, Ludlum himself is such an icon in the thriller world as well. And I mean, he's honestly played such an important role in my life, my whole life. I mean, he was one of my favorite authors growing up, and I can remember I was working at a college back in the early '90s, and I had to take a trip to visit some alumni down in Naples, Florida. And as it happened, the person I was visiting lived in a condo right across from where Ludlum's condo was. Oof. And she would talk about the fact that she'd have to get up in the middle of the night and get a glass of water or something, and she'd look across the way, and the entire floor of the condo in the other building was lit up, because that was when Ludlum did all of his writing. And all of his writing, by the way, in longhand on yellow pads. I was not going to emulate that.
Oh, God. Nelson DeMille does that.
Yeah.
Does he still do that?
Yeah.
Well, it's Nelson, but
you do whatever you want, buddy.
Yeah.
So, so I was thinking about how do I stay true to that? And, I obviously knew the Ludlum style really well. I mean, I'd read all of his books, and yet I didn't want to try to imitate the Ludlum style, because I think you try to do that and it immediately feels like you're just sort of creating a character instead of really creating a Ludlum book. And so I wanted to be able to kind of make the story a tribute to Bourne and to Ludlum. And the more I dove into it, the more it felt kind of strange, because it actually felt really comfortable to be working with this character. And I had one reader who was saying, well, gosh, isn't it hard to kind of get inside the head of somebody else's series rather than your own? And I said, I thought that was going to be the case, but honestly, my history with Jason Bourne goes back a lot longer than my history with any of my own characters. I've known them for about 15 years or so, but I've known Jason Bourne since I was a teenager. So it felt surprisingly natural to kind of drop inside the shoes of this character, because I'd sort of been living with him most of my life.
Wow.
Well, kind of going with that, I liken Bourne to, outside of James Bond, he's probably the most famous spy character in the popular consciousness.
Sure.
Did his continual battle with memory loss kind of free you from the constraints of the previous novels and the previous iterations?
Yeah, a little bit. When the hero's background and past are sort of already in a gray zone, it gives you a little bit of freedom in terms of what you do. And I was deliberately, when you read the book, I'm deliberately kind of vague about how Bourne lost his memory and what happened to him, partly because I didn't want to tie myself down in the story to what was happening, and I didn't want to create confusion for readers about, well, how does this actually connect with what the original backstory of Bourne was. And part of it was to sort of leave the door open that down the road we might want to go back and kind of sort of revisit Bourne's origin in a new novel, kind of bringing that forward again into the current day as well.
Well, now that you've spent some time inside of Jason Bourne's head, not just as a reader, but as the writer, how do you feel about him as a character? Do you think Bourne thinks of himself as an evil man, or a flawed one capable of performing evil acts?
I think that's a great question. And I think that's one of the things that has made Bourne really endure as a hero. It's that fractured sense of himself. I mean, he's got these skills, and yet he's not sort of your classic superhero. I mean, he's not the guy that can just immediately rush in and take care of every situation. He's always struggling with this sense of self, and and as he's portrayed in the movies, I think more as this lone wolf and the very laconic sort of hero. And I don't really think that's who Bourne is in the Ludlum books. I think in the Ludlum books, he struggles much more with the idea that he doesn't understand who he is, and he doesn't know what to believe about himself. I mean, is he fundamentally a good man? Is he a killer? Is he some sort of combination thereof? And I think that's the essence that really makes him so appealing, is that that struggle with his identity. And I don't think Bourne really is a loner. I mean, I think he sort of puts himself in that situation because he doesn't trust himself. And yet when you look at Ludlum's vision of this character, his relationship with Marie in all three of the Ludlum books, that's really the heart of the Bourne identity. And and so I think Bourne really sort of needs a relationship in his life, and yet he kind of veers away from it because he feels like whenever he gets involved with someone, he's putting that person in the crosshairs. So that's one of the things I was trying to do with the Bourne Evolution is I wanted there to be kind of a core relationship that builds in this book for Bourne in the same way that the relationship with Marie took center stage in the Bourne Identity.
So you've talked about how the books and the movies are different, and I completely agree with you. I think you nailed the essence of it. Are there elements from the movies that have bled into your vision of Bourne?
Oh, sure. I think so. I mean, and part of that's deliberate. So many people out there now envision Jason Bourne because of the Matt Damon movies. So I think if you ignore that, then a lot of folks that really remember Bourne from the movies are going to be reading the book and going, well, wait, this isn't the guy that we know. So I was deliberately trying to straddle a pretty fine line where I'm keeping Ludlum fans of the original Jason Bourne happy, but at the same time, if Matt Damon fans want to kind of picture Matt Damon as this hero throughout reading the book, the book really allows them to do that. So it was sort of that delicate balancing act that I think I was going back to Ludlum's original vision of the character, but I wanted moviegoers to at least be able to sort of picture that character in their heads.
Well, now that we know that you've been tapped for this role, did you ever find out what the selection criteria was that they used?
To killed everybody else.
The author? Because I'm sure there was a couple 100,000 people that would love to have been taking over that.
I know. And the funny thing is they've never told me. It's been completely opaque to me. I got a call from my agent. I guess it was fall of 2018. And she said, they're going out. Putnam has taken over the Bourne series. They want a new author to take it over. Would you have do you want to have your name thrown into the ring? And I said, well, yeah, absolutely. I would love it. And then I think 3-4 months went by, and I literally did not hear a word. And I just assumed, hey, they've decided to go another way, and that's fine. And
I turned it down, so.
Well, there you go. Then I got a call. I was actually up in Duluth getting ready to do an event at a bookstore up there, and I got another call from my agent saying Putnam wants you for Ludlum, and I was like, holy crap. And so I never did hear, what happened. And I sat down and I talked with Tom Colgan about what I thought I could do with Bourne. And I'd laid out a little bit of that with my agent when I was first talking about kind of throwing my hat in. And I wrote up, a plot outline and some sample chapters, and Tom loved those, and the family loved those, and we were off to the races. But I never did find out exactly what process that they went through. And in my mind, in addition to being a great Ludlum and Bourne fan, as so many folks are, my own thrillers are not particularly Ludlum-esque. They're sort of more psychological thrillers, more emotionally driven, and I would like to think that they were looking for someone that could really bring out kind of the full range of Bourne's personality and emotions as a character, and not sort of leave him as a sort of a two-dimensional superhero, but really kind of go back to that sort of original framework that Ludlum created. And that was certainly what my vision was from the get-go.
Yeah, well,
I knew that like they knew your writing style, and because you've been published for a while now.
Sure.
But did they select you prior to you submitting those sample chapters in the outline?
Yeah.
They're like, hey, no, Brian's our guy.
Yeah. They had picked me to do it, and that's when we started talking about the details. So that was amazing. It was one of the great days of my professional career.
And when you came up with that plot line, did it, that original one, did it kind of stay true to that from the
It
get-go?
did, yeah. It stayed pretty close. My original thinking was, what if we actually go back and kind of redo the entire, origin story from the beginning? So literally reboot the whole process and explain how Bourne lost his memory. And we talked with the family folks about that, and they didn't really want to, I think, leap into that right at the beginning. So I kind of backed off of that a little bit and reworked it in such a way that it's he's already dealt with his memory loss, and this is happening a few years after that. But really the nuts and bolts of the plot line stayed, very, very close to what I was originally thinking, and that all fit together perfectly. But it still left us open then that we could go back and sort of revisit his sort of modern origin story later, if that's what we choose to do.
And so when you got that call from your agent, I'm sure there was a moment you were like, oh shit, it's about to get real, right?
Oh, yeah.
But who do you call right after? Like, you hang up and you go, all right, I'm calling, or who do you tell? Like, who's the first person you tell? Like, hey, dude, we're going to have drinks, or whatever. Like, who is the first person?
No, it better be.
I was literally sitting in the brew house at Fitger's in Duluth, having lunch with my wife, and so she's 2 feet away to me across from the table, and we're in the middle of lunch, and all of a sudden my phone rings. It's like, oh well, this is my agent. I better grab this. So I don't think I was on the phone with her for more than 90 seconds, 2 minutes. It was a pretty quick call. Putnam wants you for Bourne. And so I hung up the phone, and I literally laid out those words to Marcia, and it's a good thing she didn't have anything in her hand at the time, because we were both like, oh my God, what the heck just happened?
Dude, that's awesome.
That's great.
Regarding the editing process or the writing process and your relationship with your editor, how is this different than your previous books? Did the fact that you were inhabiting a franchise necessitate a lot more contact with the editor, or was it about the same?
No, it was really about the same after that initial process of putting together the plot outline and doing up some sample chapters. That was a little more unusual. I hadn't really done that structure before. Once we were past that process, it really was pretty much the usual way. In fact, I didn't have much conversation with Tom, during the writing process. It wasn't really until I turned in the book. So, and I have to say, I was really, really thrilled because, not only did the process with Tom go really, really smoothly, but when he presented the manuscript to the Ludlum estate and family, they came back and they literally did not change a word in the manuscript. They weren't asking for any changes at all, which Tom said is extremely unusual in his experience, working on these legacy projects. So I was really, really honored by that.
So it had to be terrifying working with somebody so dictatorial and who yelled as much as Tom Colgate.
Tom is just a taskmaster.
Crazy.
God, I know, really, really, yeah. I mean, and he's just so intimidating, in the way he looks.
Right, physically.
Yeah.
He's a very dangerous person.
Well, anyone who can write a plague journal, I mean,
for 131 days or something crazy.
Right.
I'm fairly certain he thought that would go about 30 days, and then
I was thinking the same thing. He didn't know what he was getting into.
He threw himself into a corner for sure.
You got to think that he wants to end it at some point. Be like, you know what? I can't do this anymore.
Well, I think we all want this ended sooner rather than later.
That's true. Oh gosh,
he's committed now.
Brian, you've had a tremendous amount of success with your previous thrillers. If people don't already know, Immoral, Spilled Blood, The Burying Place. I mean, these all have tremendous accolades in and of themselves. And so, is there room for you to continue with some of these additional titles now that you've taken on this massive role with the Ludlum series?
Well, I haven't slowed down. That's for sure. It is a little crazy, I will say. I'm writing 3 books this year, which that's what I wrote.
Wait, what? What? Say that again.
Yeah.
Really?
And last year I wrote I'd written the Crooked Street, which was third in my Thief River Falls, which came out in January, and then I wrote the Bourne Evolution and my new Jonathan Stride novel, Funeral for a Friend, simultaneously last summer. So I spent all summer a week on one book and then a week on the other book. So the Bourne book comes out this month, and then Funeral for a Friend, my Stride book, comes out in September. So this year I've already finished up a new standalone thriller for Thomas and Mercer, which will be coming out next March. And right now I'm back to the simultaneous process. I'm doing another Audible original for the folks at Audible, and then simultaneously I'm doing the second Bourne book. And so this time I'm kind of going more of like 2 weeks on one than 2 weeks on the other. And of course I'm doing this in the midst of, pandemics and book launches and all these kind of things. So yeah, it's a little crazy, but at least when they start issuing stay-at-home orders, it's like, well, yeah, where the hell am I going to go? So.
How long do you think you can hold that up?
Now?
Yeah, I look back on the days when I was doing a book a year, and it's like, oh, geez, that's like a vacation.
Yeah, no kidding, man. Jeez.
Hey, Brian, do you think you can keep that pace for the foreseeable future?
Well, we shall see, won't we? The thing is, thinking about this business a few years ago, I came to the conclusion that the way to sort of make things really work for a stable long-term future in publishing, which has had so many changes in the last 15 years, was to really try to diversify my relationships and not sort of just have one relationship with one publisher doing one kind of series. And instead I really thought that between ebooks and traditional publishing and audiobooks and legacy publishing, there were all these different markets out there. And so I talked with my agent about kind of branching out and doing outreach into all of these areas. And so I thought, well, maybe, one other thing will come up and give me some other things to do. Well, kind of all 4 came up. So I'm now doing, audiobook originals and Thomas and Mercer, which focuses primarily on ebooks, even though the books are also in print. My Stride series, which is traditional print, and now Bourne in the legacy world. So it's incredibly energizing. I mean, they're all such very, very different projects that, when I put one down and pick the other one up, it kind of gets me excited to dive back into something that's completely different, whole new stories, whole new characters. So that really kind of keeps my engine running as I do these things. Is it a lot of work? Yeah, it sure as hell is. How long can I keep that up? Well, we shall see. I would rather not be, institutionalized at the end of this process. But so far, it's intense, but it's also a lot of fun. I mean, that's honestly, particularly with something like Bourne, you really have to remember, and that's one of the ways I think you deal with sort of the stress and the God, how am I going to fill this these big shoes factor is you really have to just think this is just such a cool, fun thing to do. And so when I was starting out on the Bourne Evolution, literally the first 2 words I wrote on my whiteboard were "have fun," and I did. I had such a blast writing the Bourne Evolution, and I'm really enjoying digging into the next Bourne book. It's just they're really fun books to write.
When you're flipping back and forth, between every week or 2 week periods, are you able to, on that first day, are you able to pick up that thought process and that mindset for those characters immediately, or is there a little bit of a rampy thing going on?
No,
here?
there's a little bit of a ramp up again. Yeah. Usually what I do is on that, when I'm diving into another book, I'll typically go back probably 50 pages into the book and reread and edit what I've done up to that point. And so by the time, so that's a few hours of editing, at that point. And so by the time I've gone through that process, I'm then totally immersed in the world of that book. And suddenly now those characters are front and center. But it's a really strange emotional experience because you spend a couple of weeks on those characters, and it's really hard to let go. I mean, you really want to just keep going and stay in that world. But, you know I've got to put it aside and go back to the other project. And then, I spent a few hours rereading what I've done on that. And it's like, okay, yeah, now we're in great shape. So,
yeah.
Are you the writer, Brian, that has a quota each day? Like, I got to hit this number of pages or this number of words?
Yeah, I try to do, my sort of mental goal is to get, either a chapter or a couple thousand words done each day. I don't try to hold myself to a fast and schedule about that. I mean, some days are better, some days are worse. And frankly, in the early stages of a new book, it tends to go more slowly because you're getting to know the story and the characters, and they're kind of taking shape on the page. So usually I find, kind of the first 30 or 40% of the book goes much more slowly. And then once you've established the story and the characters, the latter 2/3 of the book or so tend to go a little bit faster.
While we're on the subject of how prolific you are, if my
That's
math
an understatement.
If my math is correct, you have 20 books before this Bourne Evolution. And if it's wrong, then you know why I gravitated towards history and literature. But my point here is that this is not your first rodeo, as we said earlier. And you've been through this process. You've been through the publication process. You've been through the promotion process. What's been different about the Bourne Evolution?
In terms of just kind of the overall process of publication?
The overall process.
Yeah. It's really pretty similar. I'm trying to think about what I see now with the promotion on Bourne that is different from what I would do with one of my own books. And, I think it's the only thing that's really different is that I think particularly the first time out, you have people kind of that just sort of aren't sure what to expect. And so you have to work with the publicists at the publisher to sort of figure out, well, how are you going to get the message out about what this is? Because the idea of a reboot of, an iconic character like Jason Bourne, I don't think people necessarily instinctively know what that means. And so what I get from a lot of readers is, well, do I have to, read all of the other, Bourne books before I start in on this one? And so I have to try to kind of make it clear that, no, this is literally a reinvention of the character in the modern era, and the story is completely new, and it's taking the essence of Ludlum's character and bringing it into this modern era, but you can dive right in with this book. So that's probably been the main thing that I think is different is all of us in the publishing process have been focused on kind of getting that message out of what it means to have a reboot of the Bourne series, to really get people excited about the idea of kind of, discovering a whole new world of Jason Bourne, and not feeling like, okay, well, I sort of need to have already, read 14 books and watched 5 movies in order to enjoy this. It's like, no, this you already know kind of who this character is. Now you get a chance to really experience him in a whole new light.
Right. You've won a ton of awards in your in your own previous works, McCavity, Thriller Awards, a whole host of them. So for you, and I've asked this question of a number of authors, for you, which one was the most meaningful from a personal standpoint that you recall?
In terms of the awards, that's a great question. They came at really, really different times of my life. I won the McCavity for my very first book, Immoral, and it was a finalist for the Edgar and the Dagger and the Barry and the Anthony. And, I had been dreaming of making my living as an author literally my whole life. I mean, I can remember sitting in class in 6th grade, starting in on my first mystery novels. So, so there I was, I was 10 years old back then, and Immoral came out when I was 42. So there was a long time in between, and there were a number of books that are still locked away in my nightstand drawer. So, I honestly had reached a point in my life at that point where I kind of felt like, you know what, it may never happen. I may never break through, and you know what, if it doesn't, that's okay. I mean, there are other things that I want to do with my life, which, complete utter lie, but that's what.
Yeah, I was going to say that sounds like a lie.
We all know that feeling.
Yeah. So, but to then finally, after all those years, to break through and not only break through, but have Immoral, sold in 17 languages and become International Book of the Month and win the Macavity Award. I mean, that was it felt like a dream. It felt like a dream come true. So I mean, to be able to to win the award for that, it really was a way of feeling like, oh my God, I reached a threshold that I'd been dreaming about my whole life. But dreams are very different when they come to pass. And once you start publishing books, you realize, well, this is a business, and there's a lot involved in making a living at it. And certainly starting around 2009, 2010, and the publishing industry went through a wrenching reinvention of itself. Yeah. And boy, we lost a lot of great authors along the way, and there were a lot of days where I was thinking, man, is it really worth the effort to try to make it in this crazy business, and would I be better off? Look, I've done some great things that I'm really proud of. Should I just go on and do something else? But it was right around that time. So it was 2012 that I released Spilled Blood, and then the next year, Spilled Blood won the Thriller Award for Best Hardcover Novel. And, I had been a finalist 2 years earlier with The Burying Place, and that scum-sucking novelist John Sanford won.
Gosh. Who? We've never heard of him before.
Yeah, and he's another Minnesotan too. I mean, come on.
I was going to say, there's a Minnesota bias.
Yeah. All is forgiven, John, I promise. So I had felt what it was like to come that close and not walk away with the prize for The Burying Place, and honestly, that was really tough. And so I went to I really thought about not going in 2013, because I thought, it's great being a finalist, but you know what, I'm not going to win, and so do I really want to kind of put myself through that hell again? Yeah. And but Marcia said to me, you got to go. Yeah. So I did, and I mean, I can still remember sitting in the Hyatt there and hearing them call my name for Spilled Blood, and that will always be right up there with Putnam Wants You for Ludlum in terms of moments in my life, because it felt like, after all of the turmoil of the industry and all the ups and downs for so many years, it felt like, this is the reason you do it, is to be able to to create something that your peers in particular really respond to. So that was an amazing moment. And then last year, I guess it was, my book The Voice Inside won the Minnesota Book Award, and what made that particularly satisfying was that I had been a finalist for the Minnesota Book Award 5 times. Jeez. and had not won, and I was sort of feeling like the Susan Lucci of the Book Award. And we'll note that Sanford had won one, so but so again, I almost didn't go to the Minnesota Book Awards. And in fact, Marcia stayed home from that one because she said, clearly I'm a jinx, so she said, I'm not going to go this time. And so what happens?
Sounds like she was.
I won. So yeah,
so maybe she was a jinx.
Yeah, you never know. You never know. So,
hey, did you pull the Sally Field and do the "you like me, you really like me"?
Brian, we ask lots of other authors do they suffer the imposter syndrome? And even with winning all those awards and stuff, do you suffer through that sometimes?
Oh, yeah, hell yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, Marcia and I were just talking about that the other day, in saying that, it is a weird experience that, I can look back kind of objectively and say, and point to all this stuff and say, God, this is, look at the cool stuff I've accomplished in my career. And yet, I mean, every day you sit in front of the computer and you think, so today's the day they're going to find out I can't write. What the hell?
I'm illiterate.
Oh man, is there any mountain that you haven't climbed yet? From we just talk about all this sort of stuff. Is there anything major? Is there an Edgar, or what's out there that you think you'd like to?
At this point, I mean, things like awards are fun. I mean, it was really, really, it was really amazing last year when my Audible original, The Deep, Deep Snow, hit the New York Times bestseller list. And I'd been, on the Amazon charts and things, but I'd never hit the New York Times list. And so, having The Deep, Deep Snow hit the Times list, that was really, really exciting. So there's things like that just sort of are, little touch points in your career that it's almost like kind of checking off boxes. And yet, at this point, I mean, I've written, more than 20 novels. I just love being able to find new stories to tell and be able to do some different things. That's one of the things I really enjoy about having so many kind of projects on my plate. I mean, is it intense and everything? Great. But I mean, I love the fact that I can really explore different kinds of stories and characters. I'm not locked into one track, and I can really allow some explore some different sides of myself, and I can try to take some thrillers in some new directions. And so every time I sit down, I'm thinking, what can I do this time that is new and different from what I've done in the past? Because it doesn't matter how many years I'm in the business, I always want to keep things fresh and to feel like the reader never knows where I'm going to take them next.
Yeah.
Circling back around to Jason Bourne, since tomorrow is the release date of the Bourne Evolution. Earlier you mentioned that you were 17, I think, when Bourne Identity came out. So you've been around this property for 40 years. Did you learn anything new or discover anything new about Jason Bourne as you were creating the story for the Bourne Evolution?
Oh, that's a good question. The first thing I did when I even, just kind of first got the call about, did I want to be considered as the author to take this over? The first thing I did was go back and start rereading the Ludlum Bourne novels, and I've probably read the Bourne Identity, a dozen times in my life before then. I just love the book. So I went back through to read it again, and this time I was particularly looking at the character and how Ludlum created the character and sort of how that character would exist in a new environment in 2020. And I think I did learn some new things about the character, mostly from a standpoint of kind of his psychological makeup, because I don't think I'd read the book in a few years since I'd seen the movies, and the movies they present a very different Jason Bourne. I think they present a Jason Bourne that is much more of a loner, much more sort of hard-edged. I mean, really, for all of his his violent skills, when you read the Bourne Identity, I don't think you get the impression of Bourne as a hard man. I think, in fact, you're sort of more impressed by his vulnerability as a hero, and I think that's one of the things that makes him so appealing to readers is there is a sort of essential humanity to Bourne that you don't always find in kind of superhero thriller world. So yeah, I think that was kind of what I took away from going back and experiencing Bourne, and then as I started bringing kind of my words for this character onto the page, I was trying to create both a new character in this reboot, and yet someone that was, very much the essence of what I'd read and discovered 40 years ago.
To that point about Bourne not necessarily being the hard guy that we see on the screen.
Yeah.
One of my favorite exchanges, and I won't give anything away, but there's a few light moments in it in kind of unexpected places, and the mistress and the gentleman in the car, and that's all I'll say about it. That whole exchange, I got a kick out of it. I think that showed some layers of Bourne that we don't always consciously think about. Yes.
I do like that scene, and honestly, that the reason I put that scene in there is the last line of that chapter, where she sort of gives her analysis of who Bourne is as a person, and
I like that one.
I think her assessment of Bourne is dead on, and I put that in there deliberately because I wanted the reader to see Bourne through her eyes and realize that she really met him, and in a few minutes she really nailed who this guy is.
Yep,
that's true.
Since we're here to celebrate the release of the Bourne Evolution, and now that you're the caretaker of the franchise, what is the one thing you hope readers take away when they finish this book?
I hope that readers feel like I've done justice to Ludlum. That means more to me than anything else. I mean, I really regret the fact that Ludlum passed away before I would have had a chance to meet him, because he was sort of always out there in my mind as what a thriller author could be, and so it was definitely I definitely wanted to sort of honor him and what he created with this book. And if readers come away feeling like I did justice to what Ludlum created in the Bourne Identity, that would be the highest praise that I could have.
Amen.
We think they will.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I think you're on the right track. And that, gentleman, Brian, is the end of what we call the traditional side of the interview, and now we're going to go into the lightning round. Sean likes to call it the place where our mothers. Wait, Sean, what do you say? It's
our mothers always say, "Think before you speak," and this is the time where you kind of ignore mom's advice and speak before you think.
Well, that's usually the way I do it. So go ahead.
Stream of consciousness. I'm going to start in 5 words or less. Brian, describe lovely Minnesota.
Really frickin' cold.
Okay. I read a review from someone that said nobody writes weather like Brian Freeman.
Thank you. Yes.
All right. So here's a weatherman question. Name 2 types of cloud formations.
Derecho and cumulus.
Look at this guy.
Derecho comes up only because Marsh and I were just talking about derechos yesterday, because a reader had sent me a photo of a derecho near Seattle. So.
What?
Do you get like emails and photos from people of weather stuff?
I don't typically get weather stuff, but I do get a lot of ruined buildings and disgusting tunnels and things. People sort of get a sense of what I like, and they've read the books and they're like, "Oh, you really got to go here," which sometimes works. When I did my Jonathan Stride novella Turn to Stone, I was doing a library event in a little town called Shawano in Wisconsin. And this reader wrote to me and said, well, you've got to stop by and check out this ruined novitiate building near the river. You'd love it. You got to put it in one of your books. And well, sure enough, Marcia and I went there, and we thought it was a great location for bodies to be found. And yeah, there's that ruined novitiate in Stone.
So is that the only time that's happened, or has it happened before where you're like, oh my gosh, it's a great spot?
People are sending me suggestions all the time, and yeah, every now and then one shows up in the books. So
cool.
We get a lot of suggestions on the show, but they have nothing. They're nothing like that.
When you guys gonna quit doing that?
Yeah. Hey, Brian, I'm a huge Monty Python fan. I don't know if you are. Hopefully you are.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, what's the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow?
All I can think to say is I'm standing here. I'm not dead. I'm just stunned.
He's bringing in the Dark Knight.
Yeah. Mike, you're up, buddy.
All right, I'm up. All right. Who do you know that has the sweetest ice fishing house setup?
I don't know anybody that has an ice.
What? You can't be a Minnesotan and not
I know.
say
Can
that.
you believe it? I don't know anyone that actually goes out and ice fishes. Even though one of my favorite scenes in all of my books is set in an ice house up in Duluth, where these two teenagers are out in the ice house, and they're making out, and they've got the hole in the ice there, and this frozen head comes bobbing up through the ice. I mean, it's one of my favorite scenes of all time. But no, I don't actually know anyone that hauls their cookies out onto the ice. I mean, we all know it's just a vehicle for drinking beer, but
sure.
But I don't need to go out onto the ice to do that. So
thanks for ruining my ice fishing idea. Now.
If I want ice fishing, I just watch Grumpy Old Men. So.
I'm traumatized. All right. Like most Chicagoans, I lived there for a very long time. Most Chicagoans go towards the southwest or south. They are seeking warm and less humidity. So my question to you is, what bet did you lose that you were forced to move even further into the frozen tundra?
Well, it's even worse than that, because I was born in Chicago, but then my whole family moved to California. So I actually was in California from age 10 to age 18, and specifically made the decision that I was a Midwestern boy, and I wanted to get the hell out of all that sunshine and warmth in California, and go back to the Midwest. And so I ended up at college in Minnesota, and met Marcia there, and we've been in Minnesota for decades and decades ever since then. Right. And do we talk about? Gosh, it would be nice to to do the Midwestern thing and escape out to Florida or the Southwest. Sure. Yeah, we talk about it, and yet just yesterday, big thunderstorm went rumbling through here, and it's like, boy, could we really leave the diversity of the seasons and the weather we have in Minnesota? And in July, I look at that and think, oh, who would ever leave Minnesota? Well, if we were doing this podcast in January, you might get a little bit different stuff.
Yeah, I guess what God made airplanes. All right.
I got a question. How come no one ever says they want to escape to New Jersey? I mean, come on.
But it's pretty obvious.
I know the answer to that now.
Sorry.
All right. What is Brian Freeman's secret talent that few know?
Oh, secret talent that few know. Well, this is kind of a strange one, but my reactions are fast enough that I would say more than 90% of the time, if I drop something, I can catch it before it hits the floor.
There you go. He's a secret agent right off the bat.
That's outstanding. That's a great answer. All right, I guess I'm up.
Yeah.
You made me very happy by mentioning this place earlier. It's one of my favorite places. What is the best beer you've ever had at Fitger's?
Oh, best beer at Fitger's. Oh, there's I'm trying to remember what the name of the IPA is now that I get at Fitger's, and I'm struggling to remember it only because this is all right. This is kind of an embarrassing thing to admit. But the former brewmaster at Fitkers is a wonderful guy named Dave Hoops. I actually mentioned Dave Hoops in one of my books. Well, Dave now has a brew house down in Canal Park in Duluth, and he makes an IPA that is called Number 21 IPA, which is Marsh's and my absolute favorite beer. But of course, we don't actually live in Duluth, and so we don't often have the opportunity to get up there and restock. Well, we had a couple friends who were going up through Duluth over the weekend, and so they brought a little bit of a shipment back for us, and we actually had them buy 16 crowlers of
nice.
one IPA. So,
nice.
So at least for the next week or so, we are well stocked.
You need to get a tax stamp for that.
Luckily, they had a big SUV, apparently.
I think that's a distribution crime right there.
Yeah, I don't know. I may have just, announced that I committed a federal crime or something.
Well, as an aside to those viewers who make it to Duluth, Minnesota, Fitkers is a really old
brewery,
and it's really cool, and it's worth it.
It is, and they have a great bookstore in the bottom level of the mall too. In fact, the bookstore at Fitkers is where we're going to be launching my new Jonathan Stride novel in September with a great socially distant mask-wearing event.
How cool is that? That's perfect.
Good stuff.
Oof.
Question number 2. How do you think Justin Timberlake would handle a firearm?
Well, I think he'd probably look really cool doing it, and I don't think he could hit the side of a barn. So.
That's how you look. It's not how you
Well, there you go.
And my final question, which is the answer to a mystery that has plagued me for at least a few hours. Who killed the Grand Chess Master?
Oh, yeah. See, that book that I was starting in 6th grade was all about the murder of a chess grandmaster, and it was called Checkmate. And I was starting this was back in the 70s when Bobby Fischer and Boris Spassky were dueling it out in Reykjavik for the chess championship. I hate to admit it, but I think I probably only got about 10 or 12 pages of binder paper written for Checkmate. So I don't know. I think I'm going to have to take a trip to Reykjavik and start all in on that book again, because I never did solve the mystery. So
I really would like to know. So if you ever figure it out, please let me know.
There we go.
Hey, Brian, you survived everything. The traditional part, the silly part of the lightning round. We want to thank you for coming on the show to spend some time with us talking about the Bourne Evolution. Congratulations on taking over the franchise, for writing a fantastic novel.
Thank you.
Best of luck.
Well, thanks for having me. It was my pleasure. This was a lot of fun.
Cheers. Good talking to you. Cheers to you.
Hey, boys.
Yes.
We had a fantastic show, did we not? We had Mr. Brian Freeman. He's taking over the franchise for Robert Ludlum. The Bourne Evolution. When's it come out, Sean? Tomorrow?
It comes out tomorrow, Chris.
Awesome. Brian's an awesome writer. He writes 3 books a year. It's fantastic. We love talking to him. So let's raise a drink. Salute Brian Freeman and Jason Bourne.
Yes. Jason Bourne.
And we'll see everybody next Monday on the Crew Reviews.
Mm-hmm. Look at that baby face.
Make sure you.
He's killing things. I can't do this now.
Oh,
make sure. No, I was gonna say, make sure you kill things off. Kill his mood too.
God.
I know
my
hair. Mood.
My hair. My hair.
God, I hate you. Do it again. We don't like it.
You gotta do the snap out with me, damn it. You can't leave me hanging like that. You've been doing that
I
like
didn't see you. You know why?
shows.
Because I'm big. I can't see anymore. I'm all big now.